Here we are now on to our third card for the Sweet Sunflowers Paper Pumpkin Kit. Here is the sample of what I made. And now this is a technique called cracked glass. I'm going to show it to you throughout the video. It's going to obviously be speeded up because it takes a while to do this one. But you can also do this card just like this. Do not worry about this technique. Just take your piece that we had left from card number 2 and put that on the top. You don't have to do what I'm going to show you here, and it will be just as pretty. So for this card, we need a base that is 8.5 by 5.5. Gonna fold it in the middle, give it a crease. We're going to work with this piece for a second and get our base done. So I'm going to use Versamark and the little like sprig that's in here. And we're going to stamp all over the whole front. Fill it up. Can't see with my light where I'm stamping, so I'm hopefully I'm filling it in good. Turn your stamp in different directions so that you're getting it, or you could turn your card stock if that's easier for you. And I think that looks pretty good. So I've got the Versamark down. Then we're going to get some clear embossing powder, and you can sprinkle it on the top if you want. I could have used my embossing buddy on this as well if you have one. I took it away from this table, so I forgot that I would want to do that. But if you have an embossing buddy, for sure run it over the top of your cardstock to prevent the powder from sticking to any oils. You'll see these extra spots here where it's sticking. You don't want that, and the embossing buddy will prevent that from happening, or any anti-stick powder that you might have. But you know, I'm Stampin' Up. We sell the embossing buddy now. It's in the mini catalog with a fun tray. You wouldn't have to use a little plastic dish. So now I'm going to go and heat this with my heat tool. Once the powder is heated, it turns to this nice wet look, and it's raised up. It's very nice. This step also you do not need to do. You could stamp it down in this paper's Mossy Meadow. You could stamp it in your Mossy Meadow ink, or even just the Versamark ink, and it would look just as fine. So then I also now have 2 pieces of paper, because if you remember, this is 2 3/4 by 4 1/4. And so I have 2 pieces the same size in Crushed Curry and Blackberry Bliss. And we're just going to layer those on top of our card. But first, because we need this frame at the end, I'm going to use my punch and just punch out of the center of this piece, and it will never show. So we're going to put this piece on like this. So I'm going to go ahead and glue those down. And then we'll get to the fun part. And again, if you don't want to do the cracked glass, you don't have to, but it might be a fun technique to try for yourself that maybe you've never done before, or you haven't done it in a while, and just give it a shot. So now we have our base done. I'm going to pull in my scrap paper that I've been using and this piece. So now to do our cracked glass, we need our Versamark, and what you're going to do is you're going to cover the whole paper that you want to be your cracked image. Cover the whole paper with your Versamark. like this. And then you're going to cover it with your clear embossing powder, heat it up, and then stick it in the freezer. Yep, you're going to stick it in the freezer. So we're going to cover that really well. We're going to cover the whole thing with the embossing powder. You do not need to worry about the embossing buddy on this one because the whole thing is covered. So with the whole thing being covered, be very careful when you heat it. You do not want to burn yourself because you're going to have to switch back and forth with your fingers. I would not recommend using like the clothespin to hold it, because then you're going to put the clothespin into the heated up powder and it might leave an impression. So go ahead and heat it and stick it in the freezer. Okay, so I left it in the freezer for a little bit, 5 minutes or so. Excuse me. Bring it out and do it again. Fill it all up with Versamark. And then put your embossing powder on it. Now, if you have detailed embossing powder, which is grainier, you can use that, and it might only take a couple of times in the freezer. If you're going to use the regular embossing powder, you might need it like 3 times to fill it up. So I'm going to go use my grainy stuff so I can maybe get this done. Oops. If not, I will just do it again with the clear or the fine powder, detail powder, and then I'll be back so that I don't have to keep coming in and showing you this step. I did it 2 more times with the thick embossing powder and let it freeze. So when you take it out of the freezer, it's just going to be all glassy, and then you just want to bend it until you hear it crack. And that's your cracked glass. This paper is really pliable. Might not be going to crack everywhere, but that's what the why you want the thick layers of the embossing powder, because that's what's going to crack. And I'm not going to get a crack down here, I don't feel. So I'm going to stop. But that's what your end result will be, this cracked glass. So then we're going to take this and we're just going to glue it onto the front of our card. If you have a hard time getting it to crack, you can, I'm pushing up from underneath as well so that it's like cracking over my finger. You could put it back in the freezer and try and get it cold again. Now I'm getting some cracks there as I'm pushing up more with my finger. But I'm going to call it good. But you, like I say, you could try freezing it a little bit longer, or again, it's not going to hurt it. Or you could pop this up on dimensionals if you wanted. Let's see, that looks pretty centered. Dimensionals will help hold it down because it is thicker. I just didn't want to dimensional it up and have it stick up too high. Then we've got our circle that we cut out of the center of this piece. And then we're just going to put hello in the center. And I will use Blackberry Bliss. This is an interesting font in this stamp set this month. And then I punch it out with the small oval, which these are retired, so some of you might have them still sitting around. Then I'm just going to put it in the center, kind kind of look like what I always think I'm putting it in the center because I'm like putting the space around the like the from what I could see, like here it looks like I got the even spacing, but then when I look down here I got too much, so I have to learn how to eyeball these ovals better. Maybe you got to go from the top. So I'm going to call that good. Then I put a little bit of tape just on the left because I want to glue it down and it's going to hang over. And then for this card, I put these little tiny flowers on it that look kind of cute. But I'm going to try these yellow matte decorative dots because I really like the fact that they show up. They're a little bit more prominent than the little flowers because they're kind of clear. They're colored, but they're kind of clear, shiny. And so I just don't think that they show up as well. So I'll put 3 of these on. Each side. Oh, I forgot to do the inside. We could just put a white on the inside. Go ahead and stamp a leaf or something like the other ones. I'm not going to stamp anything in here. I think the outside is quite enough, but you could, oh, you know what we will do on this one? We will take a strip from our envelope. I'm going to just take a strip from the envelope. That was what was on my notes to do. And we need a 5 1/4 inch piece. I'm going to straighten it up. And then we'll just do like a 1/2 inch strip. And I'm going to use this piece now that I see it because I don't want the red on there. The red doesn't have anything to do with the outside, so just going to put that little strip along the bottom. Use up the scraps from our envelope. Just give it a little tiny touch of color, and then it will match with the outside a little better. So there we have card number 3. Pull it up a little bit. And again, if you don't want to do this cracked glass technique, I think you should be able to see it in there. Feel free to skip all that step, even skip that embossing step, but that was just a nice way to jazz up this card.